The House will attend to a prayer by guest chaplain Reverend Reed Loy, rector of St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in Hopkinton.
Good morning. In my religion, we speak of the communion of saints, by which we mean the living relationship with those who have gone before us, where love persists. We pray not so much to the saints as with them, welcoming their character and light to embolden our own. Recognizing the spiritual diversity of this chamber, I hope that in this prayer, with a recently departed saint, you will find, in the way in which you understand the persistent echoes of love, some accompaniment today in bearing your light forward. Let us pray. God, in whom our many lives find unity, in whom a living relationship is known with all who have gone before and with those at any distance who share the pursuit of love and truth, I thank you today for the life of Jimmy Carter, who was satisfied to lead from his values, to make those values plain for others, and to have his values challenged and sharpened by those around him. May those of every political conviction in the legislature of this state be strengthened to their own best efforts by the remembrance of Jimmy Carter's neighbor love, his actual preference for righteousness over re-election, and his bodily defining of integrity in public office. In Jimmy Carter, we remember that our pluralism reveals more truth, and that the light of leadership is in speech and law, but also in daily kindness. Help this body in the remembrance of this saint and of all those who have exemplified the work of the political life. Amen.
The chair recognizes a member from Manchester, Representative Patricia Cornell, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The chair recognizes a Peregrine Quartet from Northern Voices a Cappelletta, who will sing our national anthem.
Twilight's last gleaming
The House will attend to requests for leaves of absence.
Mr. Speaker, the day, illness, Representatives Ball, Papavici-Mueller, Snodgrass, Spillane, Valerno, Woods. The day, important business, Representatives Crawford, D.D. Poulin, and Levitt.
These leaves of absence shall be granted unless otherwise ordered by the House. The House will attend to the introduction of guests.
Mr. Speaker, please welcome Larkin Sanford, homeschooler from Goffstown, and Adele Dabowski, homeschooler from New Boston, our pages for the day.
Welcome to the New Hampshire House.
Mr. Speaker, please welcome Steve and Cole April, guests of Representative Doug Thomas, Kimberly Plojay and Carrie September, daughter and guest of Representative Plojay, Kendra Dabowski, guest of Representative Amon, Barbara Salvatore and Dawn Munson, guests of Representative Priest, Lori McAleer, wife of Representative McAleer, and Sebastian Fuentes, guest of Representative Baldwin. They are with us in the gallery today.
The House will attend to a communication.
Mr. Speaker, in a letter dated December 18, 2024, Dear Paul, please be advised that the following representatives-elect were sworn into office by the Governor and Council on this day. Hillsborough County District 3, Paige Boschman. Belknap County District 2, Matthew Coker. Hillsborough County District 45, Jack Flanagan. Cheshire County District 1, Dylan Germana. Hillsborough County District 31, Molly Howard. Hillsborough County District 23, Jean Judy. Hillsborough County District number 32, Jim Kofalt. Hillsborough County District number 1, Sandra Panic. Hillsborough County District number 8, Kevin Scully. Carroll County District 8, Brian Taylor. Sincerely, David M. Scanlan, Secretary of State.
Welcome to the New Hampshire House, and congratulations. The House will come to order. I will now administer the oath of office to the Sergeant of Arms. Raise your right hand and, where appropriate, state your name and town.
I, J.B. Cullen,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will bear faith
that I will give faith
and true allegiance
and true allegiance
to the United States of America
to the United States of America
and to the state of New Hampshire,
and to the state of New Hampshire,
and will support the constitutions thereof, so help me God.
and will support the Constitution of God, so help me God.
I
I, J.B. Cullen,
do solemnly and sincerely swear
do solemnly and sincerely swear
and affirm that I will faithfully
and affirm that I will faithfully
and impartially discharge
and my allegiance guide
and perform all the duties
and perform all the duties
incumbent upon me
incumbent upon me
as
as Sergeant at Arms
of the House of Representatives,
of the House of Representatives,
according to the best of my abilities,
according to the best of my ability,
agreeable to the rules
agreeable to the rules
and regulations of
and the regulations of
the Constitution and laws of the state of New Hampshire,
the Constitution and the laws of the state of New Hampshire,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
The House will attend to a resolution.
Mr. Speaker, Representatives Osborne and Simpson offer the following. Resolved that the House of Representatives inform the Honorable Senate it is ready to meet in joint convention for the purpose of canvassing the votes for Governor and Executive Council.
Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the resolution is adopted. Recognize the clerk for a Senate message. House will come to order.
Mr. Speaker, the Senate is ready to meet with the House of Representatives in joint convention for the purpose of canvassing the votes for governor and executive council. Representative Raymond. Representative Raymond.
The House will come to order. The chair recognizes the Sergeant at Arms.
Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Senate.
Chair recognizes the Sergeant at Arms.
Mr. Speaker, President of the Senate, the Honorable Sharon Carson of Londonderry.
The joint convention will come to order. The joint convention has been formed for the purpose of canvassing the votes for governor and executive council. The joint convention will attend to a resolution.
Mr. Speaker, Representatives Osborne and Senator Birdsell offer the following. Resolved that the Honorable Secretary of State be requested to lay before the joint convention the return votes for governor and executive council.
Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the resolution is adopted. The chair recognizes the Sergeant at Arms.
Mr. Speaker, New Hampshire's Secretary of State, the Honorable David M. Scanlan.
The joint convention will attend to a resolution. Okay. Chair recognizes the Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Madam President, and members of the General Court. As required by Part 2, Articles 42 and 60 of the New Hampshire Constitution, I appear before you on this day, the first Wednesday after the first Tuesday in January of 2025, to present the return of votes for governor and executive council that were cast in the general election held on November 5th, 2024. For governor, in Belknap County, Kelly Ayotte received 24,732 votes, Joyce Craig received 14,762 votes, and Stephen Villey received 718 votes. In Carroll County, Ayotte received 19,104, Craig received 14,407, Villy received 626. In Cheshire County, Ayotte received 21,342 votes, Craig received 22,107, Villy 1,003. Coos County, Ayotte received 10,047, Craig received 6,349, Villy received 439. Grafton County, Ayotte 24,260, Craig 29,212, Villy 1,236. Hillsborough County, 125,883 votes for Ayotte. Craig received 100,395. Villy received 4,477. In Merrimack County, Ayotte received 47,792. Craig received 42,070. Villy received 1,795. In Rockingham County, Ayotte received 113,667. Craig received 82,344, and Villy received 3,575 votes. Excuse me. In Stratford County, Ayotte received 36,040 votes. Craig received 37,641. Villy received 1,606. In Sullivan County, Ayotte received 13,255. Craig received 10,862, and Villy received 667. So the overall totals were Kelly Ayotte received 436,122 votes. Joyce Craig received 360,149 votes, and Stephen Villy received 16,202 votes. So Kelly Ayotte, having a plurality of 75,973 votes, was elected governor. For Executive Council, in the 1st District, Joseph Kenny received 87,132 votes. Emmett Soldati received 70,647 votes, and having a plurality of 16,485 votes, Joseph Kenny was elected councilor. In the 2nd District, Karen Leo Hill received 87,633 votes. Kim Strathy received 66,150 votes, having a plurality of 21,483 votes. Leo Hill was elected councilor. In the 3rd District, Janet Stevens received 92,634 votes. John Morgan received 75,524 votes, having a plurality of 17,110 votes. Janet Stevens was elected councilor. In the 4th District, John Stephen received 77,903 votes. Jim O'Connell received 66,842 votes. Having a plurality of 11,061 votes, John Stephen was elected councilor. In the 5th District, Dave Wheeler received 81,654 votes. Melanie LeVake received 71,093 votes, and having a plurality of 10,561 votes, David Wheeler was elected councilor. So, Mr. Speaker, that concludes my report, and I would like to wish all the members of both chambers a very productive and successful session. Thank you.
The joint convention will attend to a resolution.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Osborne and Senator Birdsall offer the following. Resolve that the vote for a governor and council be referred to a committee consisting of 3 on the part of the House and 2 on the part of the Senate to compare and count the same and report thereon. On the part of the House, Representatives Stephen Smith, Doucette, and Simpson. On part of the Senate, Senators Birdsall and Perkins-Quokka.
Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the resolution is adopted. Representative Osborne and Senator Birdsell move that the joint convention arise. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the joint convention is adjourned. You all set? The House will come to order. The House will attend to the introduction of bills.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Osborne offers the following resolved, that in accordance with the list in the possession of the clerk, House Bills numbered 1050 through 381, House Concurrent Resolutions numbered 1 through 5, House Joint Resolution 1, House Resolutions 6 through 11, and Constitutional Amendment Concurrent Resolutions 1 through 5, shall be by this resolution read a first and second time by the therein listed titles and referred to the therein designated committees.
Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the resolution is adopted. Representative Osborne and Simpson move the adoption of an amendment to House Rule 66 as proposed by the Rules Committee and printed in the House calendar. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Representative Osborne moves the adoption of an amendment to House Rule 28 as proposed by the Rules Committee and is printed in the House calendar. Chair recognizes Representative Potenza. Chair recognizes Representative Belcher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, everyone. I'll be brief. This change to subpoena power, this proposed change, first, I believe it's unnecessary. The reality is, under current rules, issuing a subpoena in this House is a practical impossibility. What this rule change does is it adds so many different steps and so many different hands that it has to go through. It codifies a practical impossibility into an actual impossibility. And then it does one more thing. We have a duty to preserve zealously the powers of this body. The Constitution gives this body the power of inherent contempt. We have the authority, though we won't use it anytime soon, I'm sure, to take a vote, hold someone in contempt, and enforce it ourselves. This rule would give that authority over to the executive branch by causing them to take up a contempt and possibly not pursue it. That power needs to be reserved here. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As was noted, the House already has the power to issue a subpoena. We don't need a rule change to be able to do that. The change that's before us adds in a procedure for when a committee wants a subpoena to issue. They can already come to the full House. We don't need a rule for them to do that. But what this would require is it adds in a trip to the Rules Committee before the matter goes to the full House. And the thing that is the most difficult for me is that it adds the Speaker's enforcement powers. And when we were in the Rules Committee, we were told that there would be a follow-up bill that would elaborate on the Speaker's enforcement powers. I don't know what's in that bill. That bill, as a bill, would come to us here in the House and we would vote on it, that's fine. Guess where it goes next? It goes to another chamber who may change it into something we don't like, and then it has to be signed by the governor. So we don't know what powers we are giving. I don't sign a contract without reading it. I don't vote on rules or bills that have not been properly vetted, and I hope you will join me in voting against this one by pressing the red button.
Chair recognizes Representative Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the proposed amendment to the rules. I think it's important to state at the beginning that I don't disagree with the assertion that the House has the inherent authority to issue subpoenas. The problem is that the current rule is really very vague about the circumstances under which that can happen, when it should happen, that kind of thing, and that resulted, frankly, in a very unfortunate situation last term. That's what this amendment is designed to change. And it's true that the purpose of this amendment is to sort of limit the authority of when subpoenas are issued and to make sure that, in fact, when subpoenas are issued, the leadership of the House knows about it, is on board with it through the Rules Committee, and that the Speaker is also on board with it. That's what this does. It provides a process for the issuance of subpoenas, which I assume, as everybody has said, and I completely agree with, would be relatively a very rare situation. As you know, I've been in the House this is my third term. I know there are people who have been here a lot longer than I have who have said that putting aside the situation involving the impeachment of former Chief Justice Brock in 2000, they can't remember a time when subpoenas were ever issued. When subpoenas were ever issued. So this idea of issuing subpoenas to compel testimony or to compel the production of documents is really a very rare thing. And if we're going to, I think the whole idea of this rule is, if we're going to start down that road of doing it, let's proceed with a great deal of caution. Let's make sure that before that happens, the House leadership is on board with that, and the Speaker is on board with that. I'm a committee chair. I don't want the power to be able to issue a subpoena on my own, and I don't want my committee to have the power to issue a subpoena on its own, because that might mean my committee will have one standard, another committee will have another standard. That shouldn't be the way we sort of start on a new process. It may be a rare process, but it's one that's pretty important, and it's one that can end up in the end with some pretty significant consequences. It's correct that the Speaker could, if the rule were complied with, the Speaker presumably could order the Sergeant at Arms to go out and arrest someone that had not complied with a subpoena. That has never happened as far as I'm aware in New Hampshire. I think it's probably happened pretty rarely around the country. From a little bit of research I did, my understanding is that the Congress of the United States last did something like that over 100 years ago in 1914. So it's a pretty rare situation. It seems to me we want to make sure that it's a very controlled situation. So that's why I think this proposed amendment makes sense. Thank you.
Does the member yield a question?
I do.
Member yields. Mr. Belcher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for taking my question. I just wanted to clarify something. If this rule right now is voted down, will committee chairs and committees have the authority to issue a subpoena?
That's an excellent question, and I think the answer is we're not really sure about that, as evidenced by what happened last term. Some committee chair apparently thought that they did have that authority. That's the whole point. I think this is designed to clarify that.
The motion before us is the adoption of amendment to House Rule 28. A division has been called. Members, take your seats. Would everybody make sure your voting stations are turned on? The motion before us is the adoption of the amendment to House Rule 28. This is a division vote. Chair recognizes Representative Weber for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, despite what you have just heard, if I know that whether we adopt this amendment or whether we leave the rules as they are both crystal clear that no subpoena shall issue except by majority vote of the entire House membership and on the signature of the Speaker. And if I further know that I do not want to get involved in adopting a lengthy procedure, part of which we do not know yet, and over which we may not have full control, would I now press the red button to defeat this amendment? Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Lynn for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that the process under the current rule, which is very minimal in terms of its wording, is confusing and has, as evidenced by what happened last term, and if I know that this process puts some meat on the rule to make it understandable to the members of the House, and also to ensure that no subpoenas are issued unless there is buy-in by the leadership and by the Speaker, then would I press the green button to support this amendment?
The motion before us is the adoption of amendment to House Rule 28. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, you will press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. all members present an opportunity to vote, House will attend to the state of the vote. 150 voting yea, 229 voting nay. The amendment fails. Representative Osborne moves adoption of an amendment to House Rule 2 as proposed by the Rules Committee and as printed in the House calendar. Chair recognizes Representative Nodder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to table the House rule that is printed in the calendar on page 3.
The motion is to table the adoption of amendment to House Rule 2. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is laid on the table. Representative Osborne and Simpson move the adoption of an amendment to House Rule 43 as proposed by the Rules Committee and as printed in the House calendar. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. Representative Osborne moves the adoption of an amendment to House Rule 44 as proposed by the Rules Committee and as printed in the House calendar. Chair recognizes Representative Osborne for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to lay this amendment about tabling on the table.
The motion is to lay on the table amendment to House Rule 44. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The amendment is laid on the table. The House will be in order. We will now attend to floor amendments. Representative Nodder moves an amendment to House Rule 2, and it is in your seat pocket. When the House is in session, all members of the House chamber shall be dressed in a proper business attire. Okay. Chair recognizes Representative Prout.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak against this amendment. The only way to enforce this would essentially be to make a motion to reprimand a member. And we tried that in this body 5 years ago. I was the subject of an attempt to do that. I don't think it went well for anyone involved. And I suggest that we do not adopt this and do not start down that path again, where the only practical way to do anything in regards to this, if someone violating it, is to go down that road again, which is not a good road. And also, this rule is vague. I mean, proper business attire can mean different things to different people. I mean, I'm wearing jeans today with a suit jacket, and quite frankly, this is more formal than I usually dress when I present at conferences in front of hundreds of people. So it's going to mean different things to different people. It's going to take us down a morass that we don't want to spend our time talking about again and again. Please vote no. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Brian Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise also in opposition to this amendment for some of the same reasons the prior speaker mentioned. Proper business attire is not defined in statute or in rules. So where do you find a definition? Google, of course. So I Googled it. And what I found was that proper business attire is not being followed by a large number of the members in this chamber today, including me. I'm not wearing dress shoes. And I don't wear dress shoes because I've got a big knot on my right big toe. More information than you needed. I'm also not wearing proper dress slacks. I think they look okay. My wife even said I looked nice as I left this morning. So I'll take it from my wife that I'm doing all right. But the bottom line is, if this was enforced and taken very seriously by a future speaker, we would have a hard time dealing with all of the folks who would be in violation. I think it's a bad idea. Let me say what's a good idea, though. It's a good idea for all of us to be respectful of the body, respectful of the constituents who sent us here, and respectful of ourselves. We should be dressing appropriately. That's not well defined either. But I think most of us know it when we see it. And if someone defines appropriately inappropriately, then perhaps the leadership from their caucus ought to have a chat with them. If it's a woman who's dressing inappropriately, I would suggest that a woman member of leadership chat with her. I certainly don't want to be the one doing it. We're going to have sexual harassment training later today. I think this opens a slippery slope for many of us. So, bottom line is, Google says we're all out of line. Not all of us. Many of us are out of line. Let's use our heads. Let's dress appropriately. Let's be respectful of this institution. And let's vote red on this, please. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Notter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representatives Hall is a hallowed institution with over 200 years of history, a history of dignity and respect, and the way we dress should reflect that. Now, the previous speaker spoke of having leadership talk to the members if they're dressed inappropriately. Well, we can't because there's no rule. How many times we've heard people say, why is that person dressed that way? Why are they wearing a t-shirt, ripped jeans, casual clothes? Sport, you know. And, well, we can't talk to them because there's no rule. So when I first learned about politics in New Hampshire, it was 2008. And one of my mentors was then former Speaker, Donna Sitek. And we talked about how to dress in the House. And she told me she always wore a jacket. And my first term, I had a friend who couldn't afford to go to the department store and buy fancy clothes. She went to Goodwill. She had 2 jackets, and she switched them out. And then her second term, she had a 3rd jacket to add to the rotation. So this isn't about calling a fashion police together and look at and see. I always look to see what shoes being worn in the first row because she has best shoes in the house. But no one's looking at your shoes. I don't think anybody's going to notice your pants. The public sees us from the waist up. We're elected officials, and we should be dressed appropriately, especially in Representatives Hall. So I ask you to support the amendment and press the green button. Thank you.
The motion before us is to adopt floor amendment to House Rule 2. Are you ready for the question? A division has been called. Members, take your seats. The motion before us is the floor amendment to House Rule 2. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. If all members present had an opportunity to vote, House will attend to the state of the vote. 183 voting nay, 196 voting nay. The amendment fails. Representative Sweeney moves floor amendment to House Rule 44B. Chair recognizes Representative Wilhelm. It is in your seat pockets.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So on Convening Day 2 years ago, we gathered here in this chamber and passed a number of amendments that the Rules Committee recommended on a bipartisan basis. One of those amendments, which I was proud to co-sponsor with the Majority Leader, my good friend from Auburn, which added language to House Rule 44 that is up for debate today. The Rules Committee recommended that language on executive session notice 2 years ago because it would improve our process. It would assure that the public is properly notified of our business and that decisions to enter executive session on the same day as the bill's public hearing would be made with thoughtful consensus. The amendment passed on a voice vote, and for the past 2 years, Rule 44 has worked well. Obviously, this is a new term. Committee membership is no longer tied, and with a 2-seat majority on every committee, Republicans will be able to report bills out with any desired recommendation on a party line vote. Our public notice standards need not be rolled back for the majority to accomplish its objectives. Of course, chairs need to have tools at their disposal to move bills along and meet our deadlines. The existing rule appropriately provides those tools. If a committee wants to enter executive session after a bill's public hearing to honor a family in attendance or dispose of legislation that the committee unanimously agrees needs no further work, the rule as it currently stands permits that. I've yet to hear of a scenario where the current rule impedes a committee from entering executive session for good reason. House Rule 44, as currently written and adopted, works well for committees and provides appropriate notice to the public. I urge members to vote no on the pending motion to retain the existing rule on executive session notice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago, this House passed on a bipartisan basis a rule change reflective of the makeup of the House at the time in order to ensure a fair process for all bills coming forward. In the last few weeks, I have heard a lot from constituents, my colleagues here in this House, many of you, about traditions and honoring time-honored traditions of the New Hampshire House of Representatives. Now is the time as we embark on a new 2-year session to review the rules changes that we made 2 years ago to accommodate the situation of the House breakdown at the time and see how we can get back to some of those older time-honored traditions that we hastily abandoned those 2 years ago to restore these new traditions, old traditions, back into the House for the future 2 years terms and potentially even longer beyond that, which is why I brought forward this amendment to House Rule 44B so that we can go back to the traditions that we used to cherish as this body to ensure that committees and the chairman have the tools at their disposal to act on the people's behalf as we consider all of the issues that are going forward in New Hampshire as they hear bills in their committees or as issues come up, the committee chairman and their committees can work together in order to move the process forward and deliver real results for the people of New Hampshire. That is the spirit of this rule amendment, and I hope you will agree with me and vote green to restore a time-honored House tradition, and let's get back to the people's work. Thank you.
Does the member yield to a question?
I do not.
The member does not yield. The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 44. Are you ready for the question? A division has been called. Members, take your seats. The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 44B. This is a division vote. Chair recognizes Representative Weber for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I remember a time when under a similar rule, chairs, despite the requirement in our rules that executive sessions get enough notice so the public can be here to watch them if they want to, chairs used to post in the calendar a statement along the line of, executive sessions may be heard at any time, time permitting. And if I think it is deplorable that we would not give a time certain for the public to come and watch us do their work, would I now vote no on this proposed rule change by pressing the red button? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Sweeney for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, if I know that this rule had been in place for decades before we took it away 2 years ago, and Mr. Speaker, if I know that this rule was in place in Republican and Democrat administrations of this House majority, and Mr. Speaker, if I know that we can trust our committee chairman and the members of the committee to act on the public's behalf in full light, would I now press the green button to pass this rule amendment?
For what reason does a member rise?
I rise to a matter of privilege, Mr. Speaker. This rule has never...
What is your privilege?
This rule has never been in effect under a Democratic leadership. We were always required to notice at a time certain, always.
Did the member from Salem finish?
I would just say I disagree with that interpretation.
No,
of history.
no, that's not it.
Sorry. Would I now press the green button?
The motion before us is amendment to House Rule 44B. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Edwards.
If all members present had an opportunity to vote, the House will tend to stay to the vote.
What's the matter? You didn't tell me you were here, Representative. How would you like to vote, please? You didn't check in when you arrived. Sorry. Thank you. All right. Make sure she's excused. She's back on. Thank you.
I'll ask again. If all members present had an opportunity to vote, House will tend to stay to the vote. 199 voting yea, 181 voting nay. The amendment is adopted. Representative Osborne moves floor amendment to House Rule 46C. And is recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So those of us who have been here for the past 2 years, and I guess even those of us who haven't, have probably heard legend of Representative Postpone. Because we did not have this rule in place that I'm proposing again today, we had to resort to not ideal motions in order to expedite the business of the House. In particular, when a committee has no recommendation that they report to this body, the default motion as it stands today is ought to pass. If ought to pass is not going to be the eventual prevailing motion, it requires a number of votes to get to the eventual ITL motion to be accepted by the body. And you know what? It would be a whole lot easier if the chairman could just get up and make the ITL motion to begin with. I think we all had enough experience seeing that go the other way and the problems that that caused. Let's make our lives easier by putting this rule in place. Thank you very much.
The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 46C. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. Representative McFarland offers an amendment to House Rule 64 and is recognized. Representative Notter. Chair recognizes Representative Notter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The rule change to House 64 presents some simple clerical fixes to the rule. It makes sure that the security personnel mentioned in the rule are identified correctly as they are properly mentioned in Rule 62 and not Rule 61. The amendment is in keeping with House tradition about display of self-defense tools. The House has limited the display of firearms for years, and this change would be keeping with that tradition. Be it tartan day or someone standing at the well where the slit in the jacket pops open at the wrong time, the goal of the policy was always to prevent intentional display of a firearm on the House floor. Sitting in the front row, I have had to speak to a number of gentlemen when their jacket hiked up when they leaned over to speak into the microphone, and suddenly they were in unintentional violation of a House rule. The simple change corrects that issue by clarifying that the issue at hand is intentional display versus inadvertent display. I would ask that you support this simple change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Muse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This change would add the word intentionally to the rule prohibiting the display of deadly weapons in Reps Hall. I urge you to vote against this motion because adding this one word would unfortunately become a license to become careless with the carrying of a deadly weapon. Carrying a concealed weapon, especially in this chamber, means bearing the responsibility to ensure that it remains concealed and out of sight. While I know that many of my colleagues, for better or worse, do carry firearms into this chamber, I can honestly say that perhaps because of the location I sit in Reps Hall, I've never personally seen a weapon displayed either intentionally or unintentionally here. But one of the reasons for that is that our current rule doesn't have words like intentionally or knowingly in it. So the bottom line is this: if the display of a weapon can be regarded as acceptable as long as it's an accident, we no longer have an enforceable rule. What we have is the illusion of a rule. This isn't a matter of freedom. It's a matter of self-discipline and personal responsibility. I urge you to vote no on this amendment. Thank you.
The motion before us is the floor amendment to House Rule 64. A roll call has been requested. Is that sufficiently seconded? It is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 64. This is a roll call vote. Chair recognizes Representative Nodder for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that our House rules should not be set up for inadvertently breaking them, and if I know that we should make sure that we fix clerical issues that are currently in the House rules, would I now press the green button on ought to pass motion? Thank you.
The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 64. This is a roll call vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. If all members present had an opportunity to vote, House will attend to state of the vote. 216 voting yea, 164 voting nay. The amendment is adopted. Representative Granger moves floor amendment to House Rule 20. Again, House Rule 20. Chair recognizes Representative Rung.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a simple rule with a simple...
Representative Granger. Rung.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is a reason why we require a 3/5 vote to special order a bill, and that's because these bills are very special. It could be a widow of a law enforcement officer who's died, who's been killed on the job, and who's here to watch a bill to memorialize her husband. It could be the parents of a child who was killed by a drunk driver who are here to witness a bill that would provide stricter regulation on the serving of alcohol. We've seen these bills come, and they're always unanimous because they reflect our humanity and our coming together in a nonpartisan way to support Granite Staters who are extremely invested in the work that we do. Let's not change that and make it a simple majority, because that will create havoc. We will see special order motions coming and going, looking for that one vote margin, that majority, in order to disrupt the calendar and the public notice we've given to our constituents to say, hey, this is the order of the bills that we're going to take up. To remove that ability to stick to our public notice and our calendar is going to create confusion, havoc. It does not help us fulfill our duty to Granite Staters. So I ask that you vote no on this amendment. Let's keep special order bills for those special bills that people look to us for. Thank you.
Now the chair recognizes Representative Granger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a return to tradition. We've done this way for a very, very long time. It has never been controversial. A special order motion is not the final motion on a bill. It just simply moves when you do it. And out of courtesy, we should make it easier for us to change which order we go through bills to make it easier to address the business of the day in an effective, efficient manner. I urge you to vote green. Thank you.
The motion before us, floor amendment to House Rule 20. Are you ready for the question? A division has been requested. Members, take your seats. The motion before us is an floor amendment to House Rule 20. This is a division vote. Chair recognizes Representative Rung for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that requiring 3/5 requirement to special order a bill has worked fine for those infrequent times when a member of the public is here to witness a vote on a bill inspired by them or their family member, like the naming of a state road, and if I also know that straying from the 3/5 requirement would invite chaos, as any member only needs a simple majority to disrupt the scheduled order of noticed bills as printed in the House calendar. And finally, if I also know that we are here to serve the public, to serve the people of New Hampshire, not our own convenience, would I now press the red button to continue our practice of keeping special orders special? Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Prout for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that what this rule change would do is return us back to the tradition of the way we did it before the most recent term, we did not see, and if I know we did not see all the problems that have been stated by the other side of this debate in terms of them being made for trivial reasons, them being made for partisan reasons, that just didn't happen. And if I know we did it last term because of the unprecedented closeness in the House that we don't have again this term, would I press the green button to return us to the process that worked well for many years and allow us to special order bills instead of a more complicated series of other motions that all require 50% but accomplish the same thing? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 20. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative McKay. Representative Murphy.
All members present had an opportunity to vote. House will attend to state of the vote. 211 voting yea, 117 voting nay. The amendment is adopted. Representative Prout offers floor amendment to House Rule 39. And it's House Rule 39E. Chair recognizes Representative Prout.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what this rule change would do is allow members to prime sponsors of bills to withdraw the bill later in the process than they currently can, is essentially what it is. And they need the concurrence of all the House co-sponsors on the bill to do that. And so how it would work is that if, for whatever reason, they find out there's many bills on the same topic, they have a conversation with the chairman, whatever reason the prime sponsor is convinced the right thing to do is withdraw the bill, they can notify the clerk, get all the co-sponsors to also notify the clerk, and then the committee chairman doesn't have to schedule a public hearing, and that motion to withdraw it would go on the consent calendar for us to vote on next time we're in session. Now then, I've heard from some people, and there's some concerns, could this be used to game the system in any way? And it's written so that hopefully it can't be. And what I mean by that is the chairman of the committee doesn't have to schedule a public hearing, doesn't have to exec the bill, but it doesn't prohibit them from doing that. So if, say, a prime sponsor bill heard the committee was planning to amend a bill with a non-germane amendment or perhaps even a germane amendment in a way they don't like and they want to withdraw the bill to prevent that, the committee can just ignore the withdrawal request. Yes, we'd have to get the people to pull it off consent and vote it down on the floor. if the committee is all in favor of doing that, I don't see that being a major hurdle, and that might happen once, and then people will realize it doesn't work. So hopefully this is an efficient way that people can't gain for partisan reasons to get bills out of the process once the prime sponsor admits this isn't worth anyone's time. Thank you, and please vote yea.
The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 39. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Representative Potenza moves floor amendment to House Rule 36E. 36E. And the chair recognizes Representative Potenza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to keep it easy. So I know we all make tons of money in here, so we have lots of time on our hands, and I just think that this simple sentence in our second term, when we're filing bills, you can file one bill on your own, and then the rest you have to have 6 sponsors. Since we have to have 201 votes to pass a bill, I think this shows viability of your bill to be able to get 6 co-sponsors. I don't think that's much to ask, and that's pretty much it. That's why I put this in.
A division has been called. Members, take your seats. The motion before us is an amendment to House Rule 636E. This is a division vote. The chair recognizes Representative Terlersky for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that this proposed amendment would limit every one of us to filing one bill in the second year, unless we find 6 co-sponsors to sign on, and if I know that we just went through a challenging filing period with tight deadlines, late drafts, calls to OLS, and for many of us, we didn't have the time or bandwidth to finalize our co-sponsors when we were simply trying to get our bill filed and over the finish line, never mind worry about arbitrary requirements for co-sponsors. And finally, if I know that each one of us was chosen by our constituents to participate in the legislative process on their behalf, which includes the ability to file legislation for them, and this proposed amendment prevents us from fulfilling our duties, would I now press the red button to stop this proposed rule change? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Potenza for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that in the second year we have a lot more time with bill filing, and if I know that if I have a viable bill, I can't get 6 members to sign on, then maybe I shouldn't be filing that bill. Please press the green button. Thank you.
The motion before us is an amendment to House Rule 36E. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. If all members present had an opportunity to vote, House will attend to state of the vote. 83 voting yea, 295 voting nay. The amendment fails. Representative Potenza moves floor amendment to House Rule 28. House Rule 28. The chair recognizes Representative Stephen Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well then, this would make the Clerk of the House a very powerful figure indeed, more so than he is now. This rule would let committee chairs issue subpoenas. The committee chair shall confer with the Clerk of the House on the substance of the subpoena and who shall prepare the subpoena and issue it. So I guess if I'm having trouble getting something from the Department of Safety, I would go talk to Paul. Paul will figure out how to write it up. I don't know if he's going to get counsel or not. I'm shocked that this rule doesn't say that you confer with House counsel. And then when that's all done, it says issue it. So he's going to drive out to Commissioner Quinn's house and serve him. I am not sure that's how any of this is supposed to work. Who is the person who will defend any incoming lawsuits or challenges? The Clerk of the House has to get a lawyer. The reason the Speaker of the House does it is because we have House counsel and the Speaker is the client. House counsel also knows about some of these things and can issue the proper form. So it's not a great idea, but even if you think it is, it's poorly thought out and can't possibly work. So please vote against the amendment.
Chair recognizes Representative Potenza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Currently, if everybody reads the current rule in place, which is going to stay in place if we don't make a change, all I'm changing is the entire House membership goes to committee. The entire committee votes on a subpoena. And then the committee chair works that out specifically with the clerk to write up a subpoena. There's nothing else in there. The other one was very complicated, had a lot of different parts and pieces to it. I really don't understand why our rule currently does not align with the subpoena process that many states and Congress is already consistent with. It's 100% with Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure. That is our book that we should be looking to. And committees are closest to the subject matter and the issues at hand. There's been a lot of talk about this today, and I just don't understand. We're all talking about, going after people or anything like that. It's not about that. I want to be able to, as a committee, if we're looking for information and we're getting a roadblock, I want to be able to get that information. Whatever it may be, whatever committee you're in, let's say it's from an agency that's not responding, it would be really great to be able to get them a certified letter from the House, from a committee to say, hey, you have to provide us that information. That's as simple as it is. I don't have any other things in here. I keep it very clean. I keep it simple. This proposal really is a step towards more effective governance by simplifying the process and ensuring equal power among all committees. This amendment ensures that subpoena power is not vested in one person and reduces legislators' need to jump through unattainable hoops. Please vote green.
The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 28. Are you ready for the question? All those. A division has been called. Members, take your seats. The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 28. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Dumas? You got to give me a thumbs up or down. Thank you. Representative Nato? Representative Vale?
While members present had an opportunity to vote, House will attend to stay the vote. 83 voting aye, 299 voting nay. The amendment fails. Representative Muse offers floor amendment to House Rule 64. The chair recognizes Representative Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this rule proposes to bring us back to where we were a few years ago, making members have to hide their firearms and disobey rules, because I know that no one here is voluntarily going to give up their constitutional right. We ask a lot of the members here. We work a lot for $100, and we take our safety seriously, which is why a lot of us carry. Every morning before I come here, I contemplate the danger that I'm going to face and that a lot of children are going to face. And I'm not talking about here, I'm talking about on the road to get here, because that's where more people die than worrying about children being exposed to firearms. Everyone here is a responsible, lawful gun owner. If we're going to take this right away from us, what's next? We're not going to be able to speak anymore because it might hurt somebody's feelings. We should have every right that every other citizen does, because we should be an example to the freedoms of the people in New Hampshire. I would ask you to oppose this rule. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Muse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment before us today would restore a House rule that until 2011 had stood for over 40 years. So if we're talking about going back to traditions of the New Hampshire House, this is actually a good way to do it. If we approve this amendment, carrying or possessing deadly weapons in this chamber, the gallery, or our anterooms would once again be prohibited. New Hampshire is currently in the minority of legislative bodies across the country that allow deadly weapons to be brought into the chamber. While displaying them is prohibited, under our current rules, concealing them and bringing them onto the floor is allowed. Those who favor the current rule argue that banning guns from the chamber would make us all soft targets for terrorists and mass shooters. My reply to that is the same as it was in 2023 when I introduced a similar amendment. Welcome to the club. With more firearms in circulation than ever before, it's become sadly apparent that more guns in more places is not part of the solution. It's the biggest part of the problem. As a nation, we remain number one when it comes to both our firearm homicide rate and our firearm suicide rate, and no other country is even close. Guns do not make legislators safer or our constituents safer. They simply make more people dead. Last year in this chamber, we saw how quickly an argument between legislators could escalate into a physical confrontation. I have no idea if either legislator was armed at the time, But firing a weapon in a crowded chamber, either intentionally in self-defense or completely by accident, comes with tremendous risks. Were we lucky that time? I'm not sure. But something I am sure of is that I don't want to depend on luck the next time that tempers flare or the next time someone's firearm falls out of a purse or falls out of a holster. Beyond concern for public safety and our own individual rights, this issue raises a key question. Is the People's House an appropriate or a necessary place for legislators to carry guns or other weapons, or should it be a place reserved for goodwill, healthy debates, and our best ideas for moving this state forward so we can help all of our constituents lead better lives? We don't allow weapons to be carried into our courtrooms. We don't allow them to be carried into our prisons. And whether openly displayed or concealed, we should never allow them to be carried into the People's House by anyone other than the troopers and the security professionals trained to deal with these situations. Folks, please vote yes to support this amendment. Thank you.
The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 64. A roll call has been requested. Is that sufficiently seconded? It is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 64. This is a roll call vote. Chair recognizes Representative Roy for a parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, if I know that the People's House, every right should be observed, not just some of them, and if I know that in the People's House we lead by example, we have freedom for our citizens, we pass constitutional carry, why would we strip ourselves of the very rights we fought to give our citizens? And finally, Mr. Speaker, if I know that we are never going to support a rule to roll back that, and if I know that the people that want this would also probably be happy pulling all of our gun rights, not just in here, would I stop them right now with this?
Chair recognizes Representative Muse for a parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, if I know that if we're all about supporting tradition today, then would I press the green button and support this amendment? Thank you very much.
The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 64. This is a roll call vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. House will be in order.
Representative Howard.
Will all members present have an opportunity to vote? House will attain the state of the vote. 154 voting yea, 127 voting nay. The amendment fails. Representative Reed offers floor amendment to House Rule 100. The chair recognizes Representative Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is one of two rules amendments that simply codifies our already existing best practices. In this one, all it says is that if a chairman institutes a time limit for speakers, that chairman will evenly apply that to the extent possible and in an alternating fashion. The vast majority of chairs already do this. This also allows the chair to be able to give the prime sponsor or whoever's introducing the bill, any experts, anyone the chair chooses extra time to speak. They just have to add a little note saying why they're doing that. What this is preventing is the very rare but actually existing examples of a few chairs that have acted not in the best way in the past, where they would come up with a 3-minute time limit for the people who disagreed with them on a bill, and then magically didn't apply that time limit to people who agreed with them on the bill. Doesn't usually happen. Most chairs actually do the right thing, but it has happened, and we don't make rules for the good actors, we make rules for the bad actors, and so this just codifies what we're already doing.
Motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 100. A division has been requested. Members, take your seats. The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 100. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Davis.
While members present had an opportunity to vote, House will attend to state of the vote. 177 voting nay, 205 voting nay. The amendment fails. Representative Reed offers floor amendment to House Rule 58. Is recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This simply changes our word for our morning invocation before session, which currently says prayer, to reflection. Reflection is more inclusive of a broad range of beliefs, not just people who are secular, but also there are a number of religions that do not do what we call pray, or as we define speaking to a deity. There are non-theist religions like Buddhism, and this would allow those religions to also be represented, and therefore we would be more representative of the state as a whole.
Representative Reed has requested a division vote. Members, take your seats. The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 58. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Juris.
All members present had an opportunity to vote. House will attain to the state of the vote. 160 voting yea, 222 voting nay. The amendment fails. Representative Reed offers floor amendment to House Rule 44A. 44A, and is recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So currently, we are required by our rules to offer only 3 days public notice before a public hearing. 3 days does not allow people time to come and engage in the people's business. 3 days does not allow people time to get off work. It doesn't allow people time to arrange childcare. If you're working on bills that have to do with issues that there are national experts, 3 days does not allow people time to arrange for travel to come and give the committee expert testimony. In this amendment, I've switched it to 10 days. 3 days is the Thursday for that calendar for the hearings for the following week. By switching it to 10 days, it's simply the calendar before that. Now, I understand pushback on we have a lot of bills, we have a lot of business, we're always running against deadlines, we're always behind. But each one of us asked people to put us here. Every single person wanted to be a legislator. Every single person who's a chair, I presume, wanted to be chair. And while it's inconvenient and maybe even uncomfortable, I think that including the people in their own business is more important than our comfort, because we wanted to do this job for them. In addition, if we bar access to these hearings because we are surprised 3-day notice, what we're really doing is handing over influence to the people who get to be here. In other words, the people who are paid to be here, the lobbyists. So I just want to make sure that people have more access to their own hearings, their own business, their own government. And I think good governance is more important than our inconvenience in scheduling.
Representative Reed has requested a division. Members, take your seats. The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 44A. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. If all members present had an opportunity to vote, House will attend to state of the vote. 73 voting yea, 308 voting nay. The amendment fails. Representative Andrus moves floor amendment to House Rule 33. House Rule 33. Chair recognizes Representative Stephen Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this change would make it so that after an election, when the Speaker assigns people to committees, the first named House member would call the first meeting of your policy committee, at which the committee, who may have never met each other before, will elect the chair and vice chair. How's that going to work? First of all, if I want to be a committee chair, should I start campaigning for that job in, I don't know, June? Guess who might be on the committee? Or should I just raise as much money as possible and blanket letters out to anybody that might be on the committee? And then once we get there, I succeeded and the best campaigner wins. It's not always the best nonpartisan administrator of the committee. So it's just not going to work. I don't know how the organizational meeting would get scheduled. I mean, chairs do a lot of work before you actually meet. They're going through the bills. They are arranging presentations and agencies to come in and talk to you for your organizational meeting. And none of that work will be able to happen until some other meeting happens and they get themselves elected. So please vote down this amendment.
Chair recognizes Representative Andrus. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to make this very short. I firmly believe that where there are 20 people on each committee, and we're all representatives, we should be allowed to elect the chairman and the vice chairman of our committee. And even though for this year everybody's been appointed, the same ones may get elected if this bill passes. I don't expect it to pass, but I want to give people some thought to change that I believe we need in the House of Representatives. We need to give the whole body of representatives more opportunity to vote for different things that have always been the same in the past. I think we need to change them for the future. Thank you.
The motion before us is the floor amendment to House Rule 33. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The nays have it. The amendment fails. Representative Reed moves floor amendment to House Rule 52. House Rule 52, and I have nobody speaking, I guess. So Chair recognizes Representative Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So those of you who are not completely new know that for all the history of the body, up until this last term, it only required one person to remove a bill from consent, and that worked really well. There's one historical example of one representative long ago before I was ever elected that did something, but other than that, it not only worked well, it also was very important because I think it was 3 years ago, a member from across the aisle from me pulled by one person, pulled off a bill from consent, explained to the entire body how the bill actually impacted county governments in a way that no one had anticipated, and that bill was completely, the recommendation was overturned unanimously by the body. So when we have 1,000 bills before us, it's really important to have everybody's eyes on these bills, because not all these bills get read by every member. Not every member has the same understanding of those issues. So it's really important to have the ability to pull things off of consent calendar. Consent, we understand to mean consent of the entire body, because when we do a unanimous consent speech, it requires how many people to object? Only one. One person can object and force a vote. So for all of our history of this entire chamber, it's only been one person that removed a bill from consent, until last term when it jumped up to 10. So this amendment rule change is simply saying maybe not 10, how about 3? I think that's a fair number, and I hope you support that.
The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 52. Representative Reed has requested a division. Members, take your seats. The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 52. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. All members present have an opportunity to vote. House will attend to state of the vote. 182 voting yea, 202 voting nay. The amendment fails. Representative Reed offers floor amendment to House rules. The chair recognizes Representative Belcher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise vehemently against this bill, not because I have any particular problem with the sex designation of the chairperson in that position. In fact, if this had simply offered to add the word chairwoman, I'd have no problem pressing green. My problem is that when used properly, the word chair is a verb, not a noun. It is not who you are, it is what you're doing. It doesn't become a position until you add man or woman to the end of it. And I think that would send a terrible message if we can't use parts of speech right. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So first of all, this isn't a bill. This is an amendment to rules. So we should use language properly. Chair is a noun. I see a few of them right here. Also, we frequently use the word chair as a noun. Some words have multiple meanings, actually. If you open a dictionary, whole pages of dozens of meanings for one word. So yes, chair does mean a chairperson. Chairperson is a long word. I thought chair, nice, short, sweet, would be a better gender-neutral term. And this replicates the process that OLS currently goes through. When you ask them to draft a bill, if they come across gendered language currently in law, they will automatically fix that language. That's what they've been doing for years. So this simply applies that to our rules, which OLS does not have anything to do with. Chair is just a short, simple, inclusive version, and I don't think that people's genitals have anything to do with the position. So I don't think chairman or chairwoman is
House will be in
appropriate.
order.
And with that, I appreciate your time.
The motion before us is floor amendment to House rules. Senator Reed has asked for a division. This will be a division vote. Members, take your seats. The motion before us is floor amendment to House rules. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Bravo? I can't see Representative. Thank you. Representative Foreman?
Have all members had an opportunity to vote? Member needs to stay in the seat. The House will attend to the state of the vote. 175 voting aye, 208 voting nay. The amendment fails. Representative McGuire and Stringham offer floor amendment to House Rule 47F. 47F. The chair recognizes Representative Stephen Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This rule would change the current practice where a committee chair can waive referral of a bill to requiring a vote of the committee. So here's the problem. We're assigning bills right now. Committees aren't necessarily meeting right now. The committee chair sees, no, this bill doesn't belong here, and we've already had one request for this. Now, they can't do anything about it without scheduling a meeting of the committee, which, by the way, has to be noticed in the calendar, because when you're dealing with a quorum of the committee, it's a public meeting. There could be times where this pushes you past a deadline, just so the committee can meet and go, oh yeah, that doesn't belong here. So, it will definitely take more time, and the likely result is they're just not going to be able to waive the referral because they can't get the committee together to meet right away. So please let the chairs have this flexibility, vote against the rule.
Chair recognizes Representative Stringham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a bipartisan floor amendment sponsored by one each from each party. The need for this amendment was identified last session in response to what was an inadvertent mistake. And so let me tell you the very specific circumstances and why this is more specific than the previous speaker led on. Under Rule 47, a bill is automatically assigned to a second committee when appropriations or other circumstances are involved. We review policy bills in the first committee and understand the finances would be reviewed in the second committee. The first committee is done with their work by mid-February for a two-committee bill. The second committee chair may want to pass on the bill, but doing so would send the bill immediately to the Senate without any financial review whatsoever. This amendment will allow to be passed over to the second committee, but only after a review and a vote of the full committee. There's been some concerns expressed that this would slow the progress of a committee bill. A two-committee bill isn't expected to arrive in the Senate until after crossover day in mid-April. As we said, these bills would be coming out of the first committee and voted on the floor in February. So we can afford the few days, time for one meeting notice to make sure we get it right. This avoids a problem that occurred where finance review was waived off when there were significant appropriations consequences last year. And on one occasion, we believe that the past version of the bill had been later amended, making the appropriations much more substantial. The co-sponsor and I agreed we would advance this rule change regardless of which party was in the majority, and I'm happy to do that here. It is not a partisan amendment. This is just a good governance amendment. You know, we're here as volunteers. We know we have a major lift to balance the budget and preserve essential services for Granite Staters. Whether by accident or design, we should make full use of the skills of both sides of the aisles, or at least allowing them to weigh in before foregoing the critical review of the budget implications of a bill. This structure of the amendment still allows for a majority of vote of the committee to waive financial committee review, for example, after a vote. So this bipartisan request does not limit the ability of the majority party to jump the line. It just does so with more protections against a mistake, with more transparency. I think we can work together to build a better budget and a stronger New Hampshire. Please join this bipartisan amendment to do everything we can to get this right. Please vote for this bipartisan floor amendment, and I would ask for a division vote. Thank you.
Senator Stringham asks for a division. Members, take your seats. This will be a division vote. The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 47F. This is a division vote. Chair recognizes Representative Stephen Smith for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that we're about to enter a challenging schedule where we're going to process 800 to 1,000 bills in like 90 days, which is insane, and if I trust our committee chairman to do a good job managing that workload and want them to have all the tools available to keep us on time and not coming here on days when we don't need to be here, then would I press the red button?
Chair recognizes Representative Stringham for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that bills are assigned to a second committee for very sound reasons, and if I know the first committees frequently defer discussion of financial and other matters, knowing they will be discussed later, and if I know that we have time to do a quick review without slowing down the work of this chamber, and if I believe that 18 heads are better than one, would I now press the green button to help avoid errors? Thank you. The
motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 47F. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Elberger.
While members present had an opportunity to vote, House will attend to state of the vote. 186 voting yea, 193 voting nay. The amendment fails. Representative Reed offers floor amendment to House Rule 100 and is recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is also a rules amendment that simply codifies what we already do. It says basically what we already do, that when a chair gets a minority report, and this is usually, if it's an issue at all, an issue with minority reports, the chair receives the reports from the committee on a bill. If the chair thinks that there needs to be changes, usually to the minority report, that those changes should be agreed to by the author. And this requires that it be signed consent for those changes. In the past, not always, most chairs do it correctly, but some chairs have edited material in a minority report without permission. In addition, it's happened on occasion that chairs have kind of pretended to not have received the minority report, resulting in the minority report not even being in the calendar whatsoever. So this says that the chair has to follow that and submit it in a timely way. If it's changed, it has to be agreed to by the author. And if the chair simply doesn't submit it, even though they received it, then the report would be printed in the calendar without change. That's all, what we currently do.
Representative Reed has asked for a division. Members, take your seats. The motion before us is floor amendment to House Rule 100. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. If all members present have an opportunity to vote, the House will attend to state of the vote. 173 voting yea, 208 voting nay. The amendment fails. The chair recognizes the clerk for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Carol McGuire moves that the House vacate the reference of House Bill 197 relative to the payment by the state of a portion of retirement system contributions of political subdivision employers to the Committee on Executive Departments and Administration, and to refer it to the Committee on Finance.
Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Before we go any further, we ask everybody to remain in your seats. We're done with the amendments. We're going to have a very important briefing that is going to be closed. So we're asking everybody to stay in your seats. Thank you. The chair recognizes the member from Auburn, Representative Osborne, for motion to adjourn from the early session.
Resolved that the House now adjourn from the early session and that the business of the late session be in order at the present time. And when the House adjourns today, it be to meet on Thursday, January 9th, 2025, in joint convention for the purposes of hearing the report of the joint committee appointed to compare and count the votes for governor and executive council, for the inauguration of the governor, and for the taking of the oath by the executive council.
Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The House will attend to announcements. Chair recognizes Representative Alessandra Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to invite you all to St. Paul's Church this Friday from 10 to 12. A couple disability advocates reached out to me wanting to speak to folks about the medical aid in dying and explain from a disability perspective why they don't support that legislation. So I'll be hosting a presentation and a conversation with them at St. Paul's Church, 10 to 12 this Friday. Free lunch is provided. So we hope to see you there. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the clerk for announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A couple of quick announcements. One, immediately following the recess motion, there will be a security briefing in the chamber. All members of the press, all members in the gallery need to leave the chamber pursuant to Part 2, Article 8 of the New Hampshire State Constitution. Following that, there will be a 1-hour break for lunch, at which time the anti-harassment training presented by the Department of Justice will take place in the chamber. That training should last an hour. Following that, there will be a Democratic caucus in the chamber. So please, if you are a Democratic member, stay. Couple of other quick announcements. If you are a committee clerk, you will receive email from me, but there will be a training next Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. in room 301-303 of the Legislative Office Building. Please be there. There is a plastic dog box container for treats and or toys or something in the anteroom. It is left over from the last session day when items were donated. Whoever left that there, please retrieve it or it will be recycled. Lastly, for the inauguration tomorrow, the session will begin at 11:30. You should be here and in your seats. If you have heard directly from me, if you've been displaced, which you should have, if you indicated you wanted to be here, your seat is all set. If you are in a displaced seat and would like to come, please see me. I do have the list down here, and I hope you have a great weekend. So, now, do unanimous consents?
Okay. We're moving on to unanimous consents. The chair recognizes Representative Horrigan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll be
I'll be brief. Of course, when somebody says they're brief, then they've already said something's not necessary. But anyway, July 4th, 2026 is the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. That's just a little less than 18 months from today. That may seem like a long way away, but it's actually pretty soon. It's going to happen pretty soon. 3 years ago, I was a prime sponsor of the bill which established the American Revolution Sesquicentennial Commission. Sesquicentennial is a fancy way of saying 250th anniversary. In this case, the 250th anniversary of the founding of our democracy. And I can only take a little bit of credit for that. I was just the first name among several co-sponsors, and House, State, Federal had to do a lot of work on our bill before it was ready to go over the wall to the so-called other body. But if I remember correctly, it was such a good bill, the other body just rubber-stamped what House, State, Federal did. So thank you very much to the past and future members of that committee. We're a couple of years too late, but hey, better late than never. So I just want to say let's do everything we can during the upcoming 2 years to make sure that Saturday, July 4th, 2026 is a day worth celebrating. All holidays matter, but that one matters even more than the others. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and that's it.
Chair recognizes Representative Chris Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. President James Earl Carter, Jr., in no particular order, the wonderful things that are being said about him include the 39th president, a man of peace, integrity, compassion, resilience, and a life filled with service to our country in so many forms. From humble background in Plains, Georgia, as a peanut farmer with no electricity growing up, and in a town where whites were very much the minority. These circumstances shaped his entire life. He lived to be 100 years old and the oldest president ever. Naval Academy graduate, and served on the first fleet of nuclear submarines under Admiral Rickover. He appointed more people of color to judiciary positions than all total presidents before him combined. Nobel Prize winner, devout Baptist and Sunday school teacher, husband to Rosalind for about 80 years, and father to 4, grandparent to many, and a lovely extended family as well. Cancer survivor. And then the thing that is said about him most, he defined what the post-presidency could be in the most excellent way. When he established the Carter Center, he expanded efforts to monitor elections across the world, expanding access to democracy and learning how to have fair elections. He also focused on eliminating diseases around the world. And if you don't know about his elimination of the guinea worm and what that horrible parasite would do, it's an interesting thing to Google. And it's quite an accomplishment. Did I say he's a Nobel Prize winner for his human rights work? Oh, and the thing that inspired me, and probably many of you, the Camp David Accords, where he brought together Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat in a successful way. And one of my professors, when I was in college, he had served as an interpreter and assisted President Carter in that. He was my favorite professor, and I took every class of his I could. Dr. Abdulaziz Saeed, originally from Syria. And then there's Habitat for Humanity. I mean, the list of things that go on. I mean, how many of us picked up a hammer to help with hurricane relief or building new homes in areas that needed new housing? Probably be a good idea to do that here. And I think the reason why I was compelled to ask to give this talk is just the personal note of Kathy Rogers, who is a colleague who passed away a couple years ago, worked for Jimmy Carter. And his presence in New Hampshire was really interesting. And at Kathy Rogers' funeral, Senator Shaheen told a hilarious story about Kathy somehow getting a pig into the opponent's office and somehow connecting that to farm policy. Anyway, I feel like Kathy Rogers is with us here today to honor him. She probably would have written a better speech than I'm giving. And when I listened to the Speaker of the U.S. House and the Senate leader in D.C. and the Vice President, all three of them said he was the first president that they were aware of. As a Gen Xer, he was the first president I was aware of, too. As a first grader, 6 years old in 1976, we got to vote with photos, and we'd circle the one, and I was so excited to circle Jimmy Carter's picture and cast my vote that, my school had. I think he won the election. Anyway, I just will say, regardless of party, there's so many things I could say about him, but I think you can agree that you can see within him many things that would inspire any of us to be better servants of our public, to do better as a human being. I think there are things about his life that could inspire anybody. And his funeral is tomorrow, and he will be having his homegoing ceremony in Plains, Georgia, in the coming days. And it's with that in mind that I honor him with your participation. And Mr. Speaker, I hope we can have just a moment of silence for this wonderful man and for his life of service to our country and around the world.
Everybody rise for a moment of silence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Will members return to your seats? Not yet. Representative Osborne moves that the House stand in recess for the purpose of introduction of bills, vacate motions, and receiving messages. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The House is in recess until Thursday, January 9th, 2025 at 11:30 a.m.